The time for healing of the wounds has come. The time to build is upon us. We pledge ourselves to liberate all people from the continuing bondage of poverty, deprivation, suffering, gender, and other discrimination. There is no easy road to freedom. None of us acting alone can achieve success. We must therefore act together as a united people for reconciliation, for nation building, for the birth of a new world. Good morning, everyone, and happy Easter. I am Reverend Hank Purse. My pronouns are he, him, and his, and it is a glorious day. I am so glad that you have joined with us this morning. Oh, what a great day. Now, I have to tell you that if you are, in fact, watching this right now on YouTube, you are seeing something very special. You are seeing a recorded service going on right now over on Zoom is the live service. You don't need to know all the reasons why. What you're going to see here is, for the most part, what you will see over on Zoom. But this is recorded, so I'll have a different tie on or something like that. I don't know. I'll do something a little bit different so you'll know the difference. But really, I am so glad that you are here. So glad you are here. Now, will you join me as I light our chalice and say the words we say each week? Make sure I have the, make sure we've got enough. There we go. In the light of truth, the warmth of community, the fire of commitment, we gather this day. May the flame we now kindle be to us a symbol of the holiness we seek. Amen.
We are Unitarian,
Universalist,
the Church of the Open Mind, the Loving Heart, and the Helping Hands.
2, 3. Well, everybody gather round. We're gonna do the greatest little dance in town. It's called the UU.
hop, hop, hop.
We'll do the UU.
Hop, hop, hop. We'll do the UU hop, and we'll hop till we drop to the UU. Hop with me.
Well, get your sisters, your brothers too. You can bring your whole darn family with you and do the UU.
Hop, hop, hop.
We'll do the UU.
Hop, hop, hop. We'll do the UU hop, and we'll hop till we drop to the UU. Hop with me. Well, we're happy for freedom, and we're happy for human rights. We're happy for justice, and don't forget the web of life. Well, we're happy when we're happy, and we're happy when we're sad. And when we get angry, we can get hopping mad.
Well, everybody, look at me. I'm hopping for inherent worth and dignity. We'll do the UU.
Hop, hop, hop.
We'll do the UU.
Hop, hop, hop. Do the UU hop, and we'll hop till we drop to the UU. Hop with me.
Come on now.
Hop, hop, hop. Hop, hop, hop. Hop, hop, hop. Hop, hop, hop. We're happy for freedom, and we're happy for human rights. We're happy for justice, and don't forget the web of life. We're happy when we're happy, and we're happy when we're sad. And when we get angry, we can get hopping mad.
Well, everybody, get out of your seat. And you can start hopping to the UU beat. We'll do the UU.
Hop, hop, hop.
We'll do the UU.
Hop, hop, hop. Do the UU hop, and we'll hop till we drop to the UU. Hop with me. Hop, hop, hop. Hop, hop, hop. Hop, hop, hop. Hop,
everybody join with me. I'm searching for the truth responsibly. We'll do the you-you.
Hop, hop, hop.
We'll do the you-you.
Hop, hop, hop. We'll do the you-you hop and hop till we drop. Do the you-you hop and we just can't stop.
We'll do the you-you hop. Everybody do the hop with me.
Ah!
Good morning, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Reading. I'm Rob Craig Coleman, a member of the worship arts team. My pronouns are he and him. Welcome to our worship service, and welcome to our online church community. Today is Easter Sunday, and for some, this is a religious day focused on Jesus. For some, it's a fun day focused on E-Rabbit. For some, it is, or at least once was, a gathering day for family and friends, usually focused on a meal. And for some, particularly here in New England, it is a wishful day, focused on a desire to proclaim that winter is finally, truly over. We hope. For whatever reason you find this to be a special day, may you find welcome here. Perhaps also celebration. If you're with us for the first time, a special welcome. Please check back to our webpage and look for the link. Click for more information about our virtual worship options during COVID-19. This link will lead you to much of what you need to make a broader and deeper connection here at UUCR. For example, you can sign up for our email newsletter, where you can get information about ongoing events. And you can also get the link to our virtual coffee and conversation time that follows the service today, as it does each week. On the webpage, you can also find contact information for Melissa Martin, our member services coordinator. She can help you make even more connections here with UUCR. And finally, I want to tell you something. You are welcome here because we believe you belong here. Now, maybe it's just for the next hour, but we hope for longer. You're welcome here, and we are glad you are here, just as we are glad to be together this morning.
Rising of Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus lived 2,000 years ago, and in his time he was a teacher, a healer, a prophet to many. He spoke a message of radical care and compassion for friend and stranger. His words speak to us across time. We were invited to join other churches in Reading to acknowledge and honor the ways of Jesus and how we hear inspiration in his message today. We set up a bin of beautiful ribbons on Loring Porch and invited people to come reflect on the words of Jesus and to reflect on their own commitments. We asked people to think about what commitments they have to their loved ones, to their community, to our world. Just down the street at the Church of the Good Shepherd, they set up a peaceful prayer station in their peace garden and invited people to come in and reflect on words from the Beatitudes, a section of biblical text that blesses peacekeepers. And further down the street, at the Baptist Church, our friends there set up a walk in the way of Jesus, reminding people to walk gently upon the earth, care for nature, care for children, care for one another. And then next door, at the Congregational Church, our friends there set up an art walk inspired by messages across time. Visitors were invited to walk the steps, visit different pieces of art inspired by Jesus' message. And down on the town common, at the Methodist Church, the big white church, our friends there focused on awareness and asked us to be aware of our surroundings, all that is permanent and impermanent in this world. And around the corner on Main Street, at the Church of the Nazarene, our friends set up a prayer station on their front lawn, focused on Jesus' guidance toward forgiveness. And they invited guests to sit and to wonder whom we might ask for forgiveness and whom we might need to forgive so that we could be in relationship. I hope when you hear about Jesus and when you learn about Jesus that you're curious about that message. His was radical, a radical call to care for other people. And he meant caring for everyone. Happy Easter, everyone. I hope what rises in you this year are commitments to those you love, to your community, and to our ever unfolding, growing, learning world. Happy springtime.
Hello and good morning. I'm Katie McQuaige Lucas, your ministerial intern, and my pronouns are she and hers. Please join with me in prayer. Spirit of life and love, in whom we live, move, and have our being, from you all things emerge, and to you all things return. And on this day you are also a spirit of hope, speaking to us through story and song. Like all things on this earth, we have our own cycles and tides, times of retreat and times of awakening, times of pain and doubt, as well as moments of rebirth. And so we come here today with many things on our hearts, from many places in our own life cycles, perhaps even from more than one place, as our human hearts hold both joys and sorrows. Today we offer gratitude for those joys, for the sunshine, for the early flowers we might stumble upon, like the daffodils and anemones. Many of us will enjoy our connections to family, both the families of our birth and those we have chosen, and for this we are glad. But we also know that many of us are isolated, some of us are grieving, and many of us are anxious. So may you, Spirit of love and hope, hold us firmly, so that we might look ahead, knowing that all things change, that stone crumbles and flowers bloom, and that there is balm for our souls in the hope of this day. On this day, may the gladness and joy of the awakening earth include us, and may the gratitude for this time we have here together sustain us in all of our seeking. May it be so. And amen.
Taking up an offering, giving of our treasure, is a spiritual practice. And here at UUCR, the spiritual practice of giving is deepened by the sharing of our plate with organizations that give to those who are in need of our support. Beginning in November of 2019, we added the practice of giving half the money received in the collection each Sunday to nonprofit organizations that share our UU values. It is a simple yet powerful way for each of us to live out our commitment to heal the world. Our Share the Plate recipient for the month of April is Our Climate. Our Climate empowers young leaders to advocate for equitable and science-based climate policy. Since 2014, they have trained and mobilized hundreds of young people across the country to advance state-level policies. Our Climate's Massachusetts team is proud to fight for and build the relationships that win science-based equitable policies in our home state. They promote state-level policies to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and ensure a just transition to clean, renewable energy through legislative advocacy, creative organizing, and media engagement. To give or learn how to give, please go to the UUCR website and click on the big green Donate Now button. Please give generously to our virtual Sunday Share the Plate offering to support both the mission of UUCR and Our Climate.
Our reading today is Passover by Reverend Kathleen McTeague. When the escape from Egypt was certain, when the last furious wave had closed over their enemies' heads, and the dangerous waters lay smooth again, when the Israelites could finally turn toward the future without fear that the past would snatch them back, what did they see before them? Not the promised land flowing with milk and honey, but the wide and terrifying wilderness that would claim them for 40 long, hard years of wandering. They were not carried along on a surge of vindicated faith, but stumbled forward with paralyzing doubts. And instead of enjoying sweet unity after all they'd been through, they were torn by bickering and division. They walked into relentless uncertainty and discomfort, and fell asleep on the hard ground to wake feeling ashamed for dreaming of the easier life of slavery they had left behind. Our own stories will never be quite so dramatic, yet each of us knows a little about what it means to be lost in the wilderness. The familiar has been left behind, but what we yearn for has not yet come into view, and there we are, lost in the desert. We have no way to know how long our wandering will last. After 40 years in the desert, the Israelites in the ancient myth finally reached its end. They touched life-giving waters again and waded into the Jordan amazed and glad. Maybe they knew, even in that moment of deep relief and readiness, that the desert wasn't accidental, that it had opened and cleansed them in some necessary way. Maybe they understood how the wilderness had sharpened their awareness and softened their hearts, so they could, at long last, receive not just the gifts of the promised land, but the gifts of the desert that had brought them there.
When the waves roll on over the waters and the ocean cries, we look to our sons and daughters to explain our lives.
When the light goes dark with the forces of creation across a stormy sky, we look to reincarnation to explain our lives. As if our sure as the sunrise, sure as the sea, sure as the wind in the trees, we rise again in the faces of our children. We rise again in the voices of our song. We rise again in the waves along the ocean. And then we rise again. We rise again. We rise again as our children.
this morning. This morning, well, this type of morning is a morning rich with a multitude of stories to explain the offerings of the season. There are so many metaphors to carry us along. First, there is the ancient Greek story of Persephone, the goddess of growth and greenery, of spring, who was dragged down below ground by her uncle Hades to be his wife. And until spring comes, she wonders if she will ever see the sun again. She wonders if she'll ever be warm and be surrounded by family and friends to be close enough so that she will be able to touch them. In all of her not knowing, she could be us. Never again to forget, even when rescued, how close death sits to us, always just around us. And then there's Moses and his people, liberated from the bondage of Pharaoh, liberated from so much past suffering. And now they are on the other side of the Red Sea. The walls of water have closed in on their enemies, and now they are sure that they are just steps away from an eternity in the land of Canaan, in a land flowing with milk and honey. But instead, they find themselves in a desert place, wandering, not sure when they will get to where they think they will end up, not sure when they will get to where they think they deserve to be. And they search and they grumble. There is food, sure, but manna from heaven probably gets a bit boring after a while. And then there is the inconvenience of doing without so much of what they've gotten used to having. And there's all that grumbling at their leadership, whether their leadership deserves it or not. Now, there will certainly be those who will not make it to the promised land, those who are already weakened from what came before. But most folks will get there. But there will be lots of wandering in the desert before they do get there. And then there's the Easter Christian stories that are told this week, this Holy Week. It all started last Sunday with Palm Sunday, a day that is recognized for when Jesus made his entry into Jerusalem. A week that begins with him entering to the cheers of the crowd, though maybe the crowd wasn't as big as he and his followers had expected. And then in the days that follow, he appears at the temple and he overturns the table, the money changers, showing that he can be angry. He gets angry with people and their tendency to keep nothing sacred. And then he spends some days teaching and healing the sick. And then on Thursday night, he gathers his closest followers together for a shared meal, having a Passover Seder. And there he authorizes his followers into a ministry that awaits them. The rest of the week is, as my colleague, Vanessa Southern, calls it, the rest of the week is the great unwinding. It is the Easter story that has nothing to do with bunnies and chicks, but it is a story that begins with a betrayal by a friend, an arrest, a rushed and unfair trial, a false conviction, and then so much heartless abuse. I'm sure I'm not the only one who sees the connection between that story and the reports coming out of how Mr. George Floyd was mistreated and killed. Years ago, I was in Central Square in Cambridge on Good Friday, in the evening of Good Friday, and I had dinner with some friends. We all left the restaurant, and just as we left the building, we looked, and across the street, we saw members of there's a Greek Orthodox church there, Saints Constantine and Helen, members of that church. The doors opened wide, and out came the priest, and then a coffin, and then dozens upon dozens of members silently coming down the stairs, each holding a lit taper. And we stood there and we watched them as they walked their procession. They started their procession, which I found out later was around the whole block and then back into their building. And as my friends and I watched this silent procession up Magazine Street towards Mass Ave, I looked up and I saw that coming down the other way on Prospect Street were members of another church. Though unlike the members of the Greek Orthodox Church, this group was singing and shouting, but they too were carrying a coffin, but their coffin was made of clear lucite. And that coffin was lit from the inside with lights, and they were singing, and I thought for a moment it was going to be like some sort of ecumenical West Side Story. As these two church groups came on Mass Ave, and then they both turned and walked in parallel line for another block down Mass Ave. And they turned again, and they were gone. That act of reenacting the body of Jesus acknowledges something that we in our liberal religious tradition don't always recognize. That we humans, although we have a huge capacity for kindness and generosity and grace, sometimes humanity is not like that. In the liturgical calendar of Christians, there is time once a year to see the other side of the coin, to see how humans can also be, how they can be cruel and evil. And sometimes we don't try and stop suffering. Sometimes it seems like we're urging it on. Holy Week can be a rough week. The story where cruelty and lust for power win out over wisdom and goodness, where tribalism demolishes bravery and beauty. Now, those of us who know the story of Easter know that this is just a part of it. This is just the Good Friday part of the story. And we know that by Sunday, today, a group of faithful women will appear at the tomb where Jesus' body was placed. He was placed there on that night because they could not bury him on the Sabbath. And these faithful women arrived with spices and ointments to prepare the body for burial. But when they get to that tomb, when they get to the cave, they find that the body is missing. The stone has been rolled away. Now we know that they will meet an angel who will tell them that the body wasn't stolen. In fact, that it has been raised from the dead, and that then the angel will tell them not to be afraid. Good luck with that. I would be afraid. You would be afraid. Now we don't recognize how crazy the story is because we know it. But for them, they went to expect to find the body, and it was gone. And then they meet an angel who says that their Lord has been raised. And says, don't worry, don't be afraid. We who know the story know that soon the disciples will meet Jesus in this upper room and they will touch his wounds. And then another two will meet him on the road and they will eat with him. And we know that soon, they will know that death does not have the last word. That life won't be defined by evil or loss. But somehow they will come to understand that a new hope awaits them. But I'm not there yet. I don't know about you, but I'm not really at Easter yet. Yes, I mean, I stand here with you on Easter morning, but I'm not there yet. I'm still stuck in what seems like the long season of Lent, right? Lent is that Christian season where you are asked to give something up, something dear to you, either in sympathy or not just either, but in sympathy of Jesus' suffering and in preparation for the return of Jesus and a new beginning. I'm not at Easter yet because I'm still stuck there. And I wonder how many of you are stuck there too. I mean, we're almost there, but still there is so much loss. There's so much grief. Almost 3 million people worldwide have died from COVID. 566,000 people in the United States have died from COVID, and people are still sick and still dying. Yes, people are getting vaccines. I've got vaccines. Many of you have had the vaccine. And yes, maybe today you will be able to see your parents or your grandparents or your grandkids or maybe just some friends. And maybe you might feel safe enough to hold onto them and hug them. But it's not over yet. We are close. We are not close enough to say that it will all be over by X date. And because of that, it doesn't feel like Easter yet. Now, I have to admit that I've daydreamed about what that day will be like. That day when everyone who wants the vaccine will have had a chance to get it, and those who can't have the vaccine because of health reasons are protected by herd immunity. That day when we will all feel liberated from fear. That day when we will all feel free. Now, I know it won't happen like this, but I just imagine that we're going to all come pouring out of our homes, out of our apartments, out into the street. It looked like the opening of the old Drew Carey show, right? Remember people singing about Cleveland and people dancing and hugging. And that day will be Easter for me. That day we will be free. That day we will understand what the difference is between freedom from and freedom to do is, right? On that day, the ventilators will be turned off and masks will be put away and the essential workers and the medical staff can all go on vacation. On that day, folks with lupus and other breathing problems can take off their masks and breathe easier. On that day, our choir will get together right over here. And they're going to be all scrunched up and they're going to sing and no one's going to get sick. But we're not there yet. Not yet. Close, but not yet. And when that day comes, we need to realize that it does not mark the end of something, but the start of something. I mean, that Sunday when the disciples meet the risen Christ, well, that's not the end of the story. That's just the beginning. This isn't a story with a happy ending. There might be a feeling of relief, but there is more to come. And there's so much more for us to do. Things have changed, right? Things have changed in this time. There's all the grief of the deaths, the things we weren't able to do. And this morning, I stand to you talking about a resurrection after an insurrection. When that day of freedom comes, it will not come tied with a bow, but it comes to a nation that perhaps finally realizes how broken our system is. This is just the beginning. This day, that day, are days when we should realize all the way this world hasn't been transformed. Not by Jesus, not by Moses, not by Persephone. We can't pretend like it's all over. We can't pretend like there aren't deep wounds in the body, whether that's in the body of Jesus or the bodies of the people of color or the body politic of our nation. Real deep wounds exist and must be healed. Let us acknowledge the deep wounds of racism and white supremacy, deep wounds of classism and anti-womanism and environmental degradation. Let us not pretend that with Easter, that when Easter comes, that we will all be free, that everything will be good and over. It is the beginning, and we have so much work to do, but only if we're willing to be transformed by it. Right now, we are still living in a time of the unknown. Right? Maybe today we are not Persephone about to be liberated. We are still in darkness. And we're being changed by it. Maybe we are the Israelites who can see the promised land, but who aren't there yet. Maybe, as the reading said, maybe they knew, even in that moment of deep relief and readiness, that the desert wasn't accidental, that it had opened and cleaned them in some necessary way. Maybe a lot has fallen away during this time, things that needed to fall away. Maybe during this time we have learned what matters. Maybe when spring arrives, or when we get to the promised land, or when the sun finally dawns on Easter morning, then maybe we realize that we are at a new beginning. And we get the chance to build something new. But only if we are ready to be transformed.
What hallowed memories throng.
Will you join me as we extinguish the flame of our chalice? We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts. And now our benediction. The task has ended. Go in pieces. Our faith has been rear-ended, certainly amended, and something might be mended that we didn't know was torn. We are fire, bright, burning fire, turning from the higher places from which we fell, emptying ourselves into the hell in which we'll find our loving and beloved brother, mother, sister, father, sibling, and friend. And so, friends, the task has ended. Go in pieces to see and feel your world. Our worship is over. Our service begins. Happy Easter, happy Passover, happy spring.